The neighborhood had always seemed peaceful from the outside. A quiet row of identical suburban homes, freshly painted fences, manicured lawns, and the faint sound of sprinklers clicking in the morning air. It was the kind of place people moved to when they wanted order, when they wanted to know that every hedge would be trimmed to the same height and every mailbox matched in perfect symmetry. But beneath that polished surface, cracks were beginning to show. When Ethan moved into Maple Grove Estates with his golden retriever, Max, he imagined long walks, friendly neighbors, and backyard barbecues. For the first few weeks, it seemed that dream might come true. Max quickly became the unofficial mascot of the cul-de-sac, tail wagging, always happy to greet everyone who walked by. Kids loved him, the mail carrier slipped him treats, and even the usually distant retirees waved when he trotted past. But that peace didn't last long. It began with a letter, a thin white envelope with the HOA's logo printed in bold at the top. Inside, a neatly worded notice stated that a complaint had been filed against Ethan for excessive noise disturbance caused by a barking dog. He was warned that continued violations could result in fines or further action, at first. Ethan thought it had to be a mistake. Max rarely barked except when a delivery driver approached the house or a squirrel dared to trespass near the fence. He shrugged it off, assuming it was a misunderstanding. But then, just a few days later, another letter arrived. This time less polite. With a warning of an impending fine, he started paying attention. Max didn't bark during the day, and at night the house was quiet. Yet somehow someone was reporting him again and again. That was when he started noticing her. Karen lived 2 houses down. A tall woman with perpetually pursed lips, dark sunglasses that never left her face, and a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to her hand. She was the self-appointed assistant enforcer of the HOA, a title she'd given herself, though no one had ever confirmed it existed. She was known for watching everyone, patrolling the sidewalks, and reporting any infraction, no matter how small. If a trash bin stayed out too long, Karen sent an email. If a car was parked slightly over the line, she took a photo. And if a dog barked even once, it was written up. The morning Ethan first noticed her, she was standing on her porch, staring in his direction. He didn't think much of it at first, but over the next few days, her presence became impossible to ignore. Whenever Max went outside, she seemed to appear. If Ethan mowed the lawn, she'd be there. If he left his garage door open too long, she'd take notes. It was unnerving. A week later, the HOA sent another letter. This time, they included a notice of a $250 fine. The complaint, they said, had been filed repeatedly by a concerned neighbor. It wasn't hard to guess who. Ethan tried to reason with the HOA board. He explained that Max wasn't loud, that he worked from home and would have noticed if the dog had been barking excessively. But the board was hesitant to intervene without evidence. They reminded him that multiple verified complaints had been received and that, as residents, they were obligated to investigate. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He replayed the past few weeks in his mind. The letters, the stares, the smug look on Karen's face as she waved to him from across the street. He realized that reasoning wouldn't work. Karen had already decided he was guilty, and the HOA had taken her word for it. If he wanted to clear his name, he'd need proof. The next morning, Ethan drove to the local electronics store and bought 2 outdoor security cameras. One he mounted facing the backyard, where Max usually played. The other he placed discreetly on the front porch, pointed toward the street. They recorded continuously, storing footage on a cloud drive. He told no one about them. Over the next few days, he kept to his routine. Max went out in the morning, played for a bit, then came inside. The neighborhood stayed quiet. But every few evenings, Ethan noticed something strange when reviewing the footage. Karen would stop in front of his house, standing on the sidewalk, staring toward his yard. Sometimes she spoke into her phone, pacing back and forth. Once, she even leaned over the fence, as if trying to provoke the dog. Max would bark, a short, startled bark, and she'd immediately take out her phone, as if to record it. Ethan's suspicions deepened. A few days later, another complaint arrived. This one claimed, The dog was barking aggressively and continuously for over 30 minutes. The HOA fined him again. But this time, Ethan didn't get angry, he smiled. He had the footage. When he reviewed the recording for that specific time and date, he discovered something shocking. The footage showed Karen standing in his driveway. She had walked right up to the gate, tapping it with a stick. Max barked once, maybe twice, before Ethan's voice could be heard faintly from inside, calling him away. After that, silence. But Karen stayed there, pacing, clearly filming something. That night, Ethan saved the footage in multiple copies and labeled the file HOA False Complaint Evidence, Karen. He sent the video, along with timestamps and a detailed explanation, to the HOA board. Then he waited. Days passed with no reply. Karen, however, seemed even bolder. She began confronting other neighbors, pointing at houses, writing things down. Her crusade had spread. Finally, an email arrived from the HOA president. The board thanked Ethan for bringing the matter to their attention and stated that they were reviewing the evidence internally. It was the kind of bureaucratic message that didn't promise much. But Ethan had a feeling things were changing. Then, 2 nights later, something unexpected happened. As Ethan was reviewing his front camera footage again, he saw Karen outside. Not in front of his house, but across the street at the Thompsons. She was yelling at someone, waving her arms, and storming up their driveway. The argument seemed heated, though no sound could be heard. Eventually, she pointed directly at the camera, as if daring it to catch her. Ethan rewound the footage, watching carefully. Over the next few days, similar scenes unfolded. Karen shouting at neighbors, banging on doors, even arguing with the mail carrier. It was all caught on camera. That's when Ethan realized something bigger was happening. She wasn't just after him. She was at war with the entire neighborhood. He compiled everything. Hours of footage, all neatly organized, and prepared to send it to the HOA board. But before he could, another envelope arrived in his mailbox. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was handwritten, the pen strokes sharp and angry. Inside was a single sheet of paper that read, "You can't hide behind your dog forever." Ethan folded the note slowly, the weight of it settling in. Karen knew. Somehow, she knew what he was doing. And the real fight was only just beginning. The next morning felt heavier than usual. The air itself seemed different, colder, tense, as if the neighborhood had absorbed the hostility brewing beneath its picture-perfect lawns. The note from Karen sat on the kitchen counter like a threat disguised in ink. Ethan kept rereading it, wondering how much she actually knew. Had she seen the cameras? Or was she just guessing, trying to rattle him? He decided not to take chances. He installed an additional camera, this time tucked beneath the eaves of his garage, facing the street at a wide angle. If Karen was going to step foot anywhere near his property again, he'd catch her from every possible angle. For a few days, things went quiet. No new letters, no sightings of Karen, no barking complaints. It almost felt peaceful again. But Ethan knew better than to believe it was over. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, something strange happened. As Ethan worked from his office, he heard the faint hum of a car engine idling outside his house. It lingered there for several minutes before finally driving off. Curious, he checked his front camera feed. The vehicle was a white sedan, familiar, but not immediately recognizable. Later that evening, when he scrolled through the footage again, he noticed the driver, Karen. She wasn't just walking by anymore. She was driving slowly past his home, phone in hand, clearly filming something. It was unsettling. He knew she had crossed the line from nosy neighbor to stalker. Ethan documented everything. Every appearance, every car pass, every suspicious incident. The footage was piling up. He even started keeping a written log to accompany the videos. Each entry was dated, time-stamped, and carefully described. It was becoming a full investigation, not by choice, but by necessity. A few days later, the HOA called an emergency meeting. The notice arrived via email, urging all residents to attend due to growing tensions and multiple complaints filed within the community. Ethan knew exactly what it was about. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the community clubhouse, the same sterile space where neighbors gathered for holiday events and rule updates. Ethan arrived early, camera footage backed up on a flash drive in his pocket, ready for whatever came next. The room filled quickly. Most people came in pairs, couples whispering to each other, exchanging uneasy looks. And then Karen arrived, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her nose, striding to the front like she owned the place. She wore the smug expression of someone who believed she was about to win. The HOA president began with a speech about unity and cooperation, but it didn't take long before the meeting spiraled. Karen stood up, interrupting, claiming she was being harassed by dog owners who refused to respect community peace. She insisted certain residents, clearly referring to Ethan, were violating noise ordinances, and that she had recordings to prove it. The room grew tense. Ethan could feel several sets of eyes turned toward him, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly reached into his pocket and held up the flash drive. The HOA president invited him to speak, and for the first time since this ordeal began, Ethan had the floor. He explained everything. The repeated false complaints, the baseless fines, the footage showing Karen provoking his dog. The president seemed skeptical until Ethan offered to play the recordings. Within minutes, the footage filled the projector screen. There was no mistaking it. Karen could be seen walking up to Ethan's fence, tapping it with a stick, smirking as Max barked once in surprise. Then she lifted her phone and pretended to record the evidence she would later use against him. Gasps rippled through the room. The next clip showed her arguing with the Thompsons across the street, shouting and waving her arms wildly. Another showed her berating the mail carrier, blocking the path of his truck while gesturing toward a supposed illegal parking violation. Each video painted a clearer picture. Karen wasn't maintaining order. She was causing chaos. The HOA president paused the video. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the projector. Karen's expression had changed from smug confidence to tight-lipped rage. She muttered something under her breath and tried to interject, claiming the videos were edited or taken out of context. But no one seemed to believe her. Ethan sat quietly, letting the footage speak for itself. After several tense moments, the HOA president cleared his throat and said they would review the evidence thoroughly. The meeting was adjourned, and people began whispering among themselves. Some glanced at Karen with suspicion. Others looked at Ethan with sympathy. It was clear that public opinion had shifted as he left the clubhouse. Ethan felt the first real sense of relief in weeks, but the feeling didn't last long. The next morning, he woke to a commotion outside. Neighbors were gathered near the entrance of the cul-de-sac, pointing toward his mailbox. When Ethan walked over, he saw it. Someone had dumped a pile of dog waste right in front of his driveway. The message was clear. Karen wasn't done. He reviewed his overnight footage and found her again, caught on camera, sneaking across the street at 2 a.m., wearing dark clothes and carrying a small plastic bag. She crouched by his mailbox, dropped the contents, and hurried away. Ethan didn't even hesitate. He emailed the footage directly to the HOA, copying the local police for good measure. Then he waited. The following day, the HOA president called him personally. The tone was different now, firm, apologetic, and official. He informed Ethan that the board had reviewed all the evidence and had decided to take immediate disciplinary action. Karen would be fined for harassment, trespassing, and filing false complaints. Furthermore, her associate status with the HOA would be permanently revoked. The news spread quickly through Maple Grove Estates. Within hours, Karen's reputation collapsed. The same neighbors who used to tolerate her nitpicking now avoided her altogether. Some even confronted her directly, telling her to mind her own business. But victory felt uneasy. Ethan knew Karen wouldn't accept defeat quietly. She had spent years controlling this neighborhood, enforcing her own warped version of order. She wasn't going to give that up without a fight. That night, Ethan locked every door and checked every camera feed twice. Around midnight, as he was about to head to bed, a notification pinged on his phone. Motion detected near the backyard. He opened the live feed. There she was, Karen, standing by the fence, motionless, staring directly into the camera lens. The light from the infrared sensor reflected off her eyes, giving them an eerie, hollow glow. She didn't move, She didn't speak. She just watched. Then, after several seconds, she turned and disappeared into the darkness. Ethan sat frozen, heart pounding, realizing that the HOA fines might have stopped her legally. But she was far from finished personally. Something told him the next chapter of this neighborhood war was about to get much darker. The morning after that eerie encounter, Maple Grove Estates felt unnervingly still. The cul-de-sac that usually hummed with lawnmowers and morning chatter was silent, as though the entire neighborhood was holding its breath. The HOA's punishment against Karen had clearly rattled everyone. People were keeping their distance, waiting to see what she would do next. Ethan hadn't slept much. Every noise made him check the cameras. Every creak of the house made his pulse spike. The image of Karen standing motionless by the fence replayed over and over in his head. That blank stare, that deliberate challenge. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was building, that she wasn't done trying to reclaim her power. Later that afternoon, as he took Max for a walk, he noticed small details around the neighborhood that sent a chill down his spine. Several mailboxes had been vandalized, dented, scratched, or smeared with mud. One car had been keyed. Another neighbor's garden lights were smashed. No one saw who did it, but everyone seemed to know. Karen's house stood 2 doors down, blinds drawn tight, the once pristine yard now slightly overgrown. Her car hadn't moved in days. The woman who had spent years patrolling the street now kept herself locked inside. But there was still that uneasy feeling, the kind that said the storm hadn't passed, only moved underground. That evening, Ethan got another email from the HOA. The board had received multiple reports of new disturbances and asked residents to stay vigilant. They were considering bringing in local law enforcement for mediation. It was the kind of bureaucratic phrasing that avoided the real issue. Karen was unraveling. 2 nights later, it all came to a head. It started just past midnight. Ethan was reviewing footage again, a habit he couldn't seem to stop, when a sudden alert appeared on his screen. Motion detected. Front yard. He opened the feed instantly. The camera showed Karen standing at the edge of his driveway again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her was a stack of papers, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, fluttering in the faint breeze. Slowly, methodically, she began taping them to his fence. Page after page, covering nearly the entire length of it. Ethan didn't go outside. He just watched, recording everything. When she was done, she stepped back to look at her work, her movements jerky, almost feverish. Then she turned toward the camera, smiled faintly, and walked back to her house. The next morning, Ethan went outside to see what she'd done. The papers were printed copies of HOA regulations, bylaws, and rules. Every line she'd ever enforced, each one highlighted and annotated with angry red ink. Scrawled across the top of each page in thick black marker were the words, "And no one respects the rules anymore." Neighbors gathered quickly, whispering among themselves, horrified and fascinated at the same time. Within the hour, the HOA president arrived. When he saw the fence, his expression turned grim. Karen had crossed another line, this time one that couldn't be ignored. The HOA filed an official restraining order request, backed by Ethan's footage and multiple neighbor statements. The local police were called in to enforce it. By the end of the day, officers were knocking on Karen's door. She didn't answer at first, but after several minutes, the door creaked open. From a distance, Ethan watched as the police spoke to her. She looked smaller now, her energy drained. Eventually, they led her to a patrol car, not in handcuffs, but under what seemed like a wellness check. For the first time in months, silence returned to Maple Grove Estates, and the days that followed, the neighborhood slowly came back to life. The mailboxes were repaired. The Thompsons replanted their garden. Kids rode their bikes again, laughter echoing through the cul-de-sac. And for once, no one cared if the trash bin stayed out an extra hour or if someone's grass grew half an inch too long. The HOA even sent an official apology to Ethan, acknowledging their mistake in trusting a single complainant without due evidence. They waived his previous fines and offered to pay for upgraded security equipment. A symbolic gesture, but one that showed they had learned something. But the story didn't end there. About a week later, Ethan received an unmarked envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a USB drive and a short note. "You might want to see this." There was no signature. He hesitated before plugging it in, but curiosity got the better of him. The drive contained several video files, security footage, clearly from someone else's cameras, showing Karen over the past few weeks before her breakdown. She wasn't just tormenting him. She was spying on nearly everyone in the neighborhood. She had hidden cameras in her flower beds, in birdhouses, even inside a decorative mailbox. The footage showed her sneaking around at night, checking her recordings, and jotting notes into that same clipboard. It was chilling. Ethan didn't know who had sent it, maybe another neighbor who discovered one of her cameras after she was taken away. He turned the footage over to the HOA and the police, just to be safe. After that, Karen's name wasn't mentioned much anymore. Months passed. The seasons changed. The neighborhood slowly forgot the tension, the letters, the shouting matches. Life settled back into a calm rhythm. Kids playing outside, barbecues on weekends, quiet evenings with the hum of sprinklers and the chirping of crickets. Max would lie by the fence, tail wagging lazily, no longer disturbed by anyone tapping on the gate. But sometimes, late at night, Ethan would scroll through his camera feeds before bed. Not because he was afraid, but because the habit had become second nature. He'd watch the empty street, the stillness of the cul-de-sac, the soft glow of porch lights. Everything looked peaceful again. Until one night it was just past midnight when a faint motion alert pinged on his phone. Ethan opened the app. The camera feed showed the street calm and empty, but in the far corner of the frame, barely visible in the shadow near Karen's old house, something moved. It was just a flicker, a shape, maybe a reflection, gone in less than a second. But for that brief moment, it looked unmistakably like someone standing there, watching. Ethan stared at the screen for several long minutes. The shape didn't reappear. The alert stopped. Maybe it was nothing. A passing car's reflection, a branch swaying in the wind, still. He set the phone down slowly and glanced toward the window. The night outside was silent, but the unease lingered. The HOA had new rules now, new boundaries, and cameras at nearly every corner. But Ethan knew that rules couldn't stop everything. Sometimes, people like Karen didn't just vanish. They waited, watching for the next reason to strike. He looked down at Max, who had lifted his head, ears perked, staring toward the same window. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Ethan closed the blinds, whispered a quiet reassurance to the dog, and turned off the lights. Outside, the streetlight flickered once, then went out.